Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. DeLuzio.
Sorry, didn't get finished.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would want to add one note to agree with Mr. Waltz. I share his concern about our NATO allies not yet meeting, or too many not meeting, their defense spending obligation. I'm encouraged by some of the progress on that front, but I share that concern as well. I want to spend my time on a different topic, though, shipbuilding and our defense industrial base. Yesterday, joint subcommittee hearing on the posture and readiness, the mobility enterprise, I heard some disturbing facts, including the average age of our Sea Lift fleet being 44 years old. I think it was 17 vessels being more than 50 years old, or 50 years old and older. That the Maritime Administration's resorting to purchasing foreign-built ships. Despite clear direction from Congress over repeated years, the Navy hasn't allocated money to build new Sea Lift ships. In the FY23 Chief of Naval Operations Long-Range Shipbuilding Plan, there's no mention of building a new Sea Lift fleet, but rather only to buy used, which really means foreign, and refit. The decision to neglect shipbuilding, I think along with our government's past decisions across decades, to consolidate the defense industrial base and send our supply chains overseas, I think it's gutted this American industry, like so many others we've seen in our country. We take, at our peril, freedom of the seas for granted, I think, and I fear. We can't forget the disruption caused by our reliance on foreign supply chains. As ships stacked up outside harbors and ports during the worst of the pandemic, I think we'd be foolish to overlook the Chinese Communist Party's buildup in the east of and south of China seas and their growing potential to restrict shipping and access to those sea lanes in international waters. But simply, I think we have to build ships here, not just our naval vessels, our military ships, but others. A good example of this is the success of the national security multi-vision vessel in Philadelphia's shipyard. I think that investment in our shipbuilding infrastructure is critical and certainly part of deterring communist China. I don't think this is just the Navy's fault. I think Congress is to blame here as well. I heard from Admiral Phillips, the Maritime Administration, yesterday that although authorized in FY23 NDAA, Sea Lift recapitalization of the Ready Reserve Force was not funded, or to put it plainly, there was no funding for the program that invests in domestic shipbuilding infrastructure investment along the lines I'm discussing here. General Milley, I'll start with you, sir. Please explain as clearly as you can, how does this reliance on foreign-built ships impact our national security, our readiness?
I think you're talking commercial ships?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so look at the United States over decades upon decades have outsourced our commercial shipbuilding programs. And that impacts our ability to conduct sea lift. And one of the fundamental characteristics of the U.S. military is power projection. We do that through airlift and sea lift, primarily by sea lift. 80% of the world's commerce goes over the ocean. So sea lift, the ability to produce ships, commercial shipping for sea lift, is fundamental, I think, to our national security. Unfortunately, we've outsourced it over many, many decades, and it probably needs a corrective over time.
Look, I think there are investment decisions this committee and this Congress has to make that reflect that we care about this. I certainly do. Secretary Oskin, I'll ask you a little different question. It's related. I've worried about the consolidation in the defense industrial base, something like a 90% reduction in the prime contractors since the 90s. How has that overly consolidated, and I think at times inadequate, defense industrial base impact our national security?
I share your concern that what we've seen over the years as the number of companies that we have participating competitively in this space has decreased. In some cases, it's provided advantage because we've been able to do things more efficiently. In other cases, it's taken away that competition that has kept us healthy. So I want to make sure that small businesses have a voice and they feel that they can compete, and we're working to provide the means for them to compete in this space. We've made a little progress, but there's a lot more to be done. But to answer your question, this is an area of concern. So.
Good. Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Jackson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, General Milley, for being here today. I appreciate it. I have a couple of district-specific questions for you here. My district is the 13th Congressional District. It's the home of the Pantex plant, the United States' only nuclear assembly and disassembly plant that we have. For the past few decades, DoD has stressed that it's placing a renewed emphasis on the strategic deterrence enterprise, and the Pantex plant is an absolute key component of that effort. There's no doubt about that. While DoD has been committing resources and seemingly doing its part, there doesn't seem to be concert or unity of effort between DoD and the Department of Energy on updating Pantex plant's severely aging infrastructure, which is actually, I think, having an impact on the mission right now. General Milley, I just want to ask you real quick, can you update us, or do you have anything to update us with on coordination that's occurring between DoD and the Department of Energy regarding Pantex plant, given Pantex was slotted to receive hundreds of millions of dollars for improving the facility the past several budget cycles, with those same projects now being zeroed out in the president's current budget?
I'm going to have to take that for the record, Congressman. I apologize. I'm not familiar with the specifics of the DOD coordination on Pantex, but I can get you a written answer here shortly.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. I think it impacts, the Department of Defense as well, obviously. Also, as you gentlemen know, the Army is dependent on vertical aircraft in nearly every aspect of operations. 20 years of the global war on terror taxed Army aviation assets such that the H-60 and the CH-47 had been maxed out now, and it necessitated that we have to have a new vertical lift option now. In December, the Army selected Bell Helicopter's V-280 platform to fulfill the Army's requirement for future long-range assault aircraft. However, the contract award has been protested, and we're looking at a GOA decision, hopefully sometime this week. I don't know. But, General Milley, I was going to ask you, have you reviewed the contract award process the Army used in this case? Are you confident that the Army used a justifiable and defensible methodology to make its selection? And is the Army doing everything in its power to defend its decision on this contract award before the GAO?
Thanks, Congressman. As a matter of course, I do not review contracts. I did that as a Chief of Staff of the Army, but as a chairman, I'm much more in an operational role. So I don't review those, but I'll circle back with the OSD folks who do that to ensure that, but I do know it's in protest. So I don't want to make any public comments that would jeopardize anything in protest.
Understand.
And I do know that future vertical lift is one of the key priorities, one of those big 6 priorities that we talked about earlier with the Army Futures Command. But
yes,
as far as the contract itself, I'll have to get back to you on that as well.
Yes, sir, I understand. Okay, I have 2 more questions real quick to hit on. Some of it's already been hit on here already, but I just want to start by saying, General Milley, I do appreciate your 40-plus years of service to this country. Having served 25 years on active duty myself, I know what a burden that is on you and your family. It's no secret that I've got a little bit of an issue and had a little bit of an issue with some of the stuff that's happened in your last job here as chairman over the last few years. We've talked about that before, but I do want to say that I do think that politicization of our general and flag officers has become a real issue in our military. I think that it does have a big impact on the forces in general. You know, mentioned by Congressman Johnson here, some of the polls that were out there on just the public's opinion of what that matters. And General Milley, I'll just say, whether it's real or whether it's perception, I think it matters. And I just want to point out, it's not just me saying it. There's an article that came out in Politico here on the 24th of March, just a few days ago, 5 days ago, and the title of the article is "The Surreal Post-Trump Embrace of Mark Milley. In spreading the gospel of an apolitical military, he's becoming a political lightning rod and a reminder of how far Washington is from normal." So I'm just going to leave it at that. I have a question I'll just give to you off the record.
I can just tell you that I am committed to an apolitical, nonpartisan military, myself on down, 100%. I read the article.
Yes, sir.
The media is the media.
Yes, sir. And I understand. And sometimes perception is not reality. But I think you will agree with me that perception has a big impact on your ability to lead.
Military's got no role in politics.
Yes, sir. So I appreciate that. With the last few minutes I have here, Secretary Austin, I just wanted to ask you. We've talked about the DEI initiative going on in DoD right now. I think that we've heard I've heard lots of times in lots of different conversations about the potential positives impact of that. But I think that there is a negative impact of that as well. I think that it has an impact on readiness and has an impact on recruitment and retention. I think it creates in some circles an environment of hate and discontent when you're pitting one group against another. It's identity politics to some extent. I think it's damaging. I just want to know: were there any studies that were done before this was rolled out? Unbiased, scientific-based studies that showed that this was a good idea.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Takuda, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I first just want to thank you for your decision last year to safely shut down defuel, and close the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility on the island of Oahu. What you said then continues to be true now. This was the right decision to make for our people, for our environment, public health, and overall national security. I'm also grateful for your continued engagement with and oversight of the department's lines of effort on Red Hill, including your own personal visits during September of 2022 and your recent meeting with senior department leadership on March 16th. That being said, you and I both know there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Hawaii with regard to Red Hill and rebuilding lost trust, a broken trust with the military and our communities, and how this crisis was handled. Part of the challenge is that different organizations are responsible for different lines of effort related to Red Hill. Joint Task Force Red Hill is focused on just the defueling, while Navy Facilities Engineering Command oversees environmental remediation and aquifer restoration. The Navy is largely responsible for facility closure, and separate from all of that, you've got the Defense Health Agency that handles the medical care for impacted individuals. Now, to most Hawaii residents, this is very, very confusing, and quite frankly, this should not fall upon them to have to navigate the complexities of our military bureaucracy when it really comes down to ensuring them transparency and accountability. Our Hawaii Congressional delegation has stood unified in our support for language in last year's NDAA that required the department to identify a single point of contact to oversee and communicate with the public and Congress regarding the status of Red Hill. Mr. Secretary, what is the status of the department's effort to implement this requirement, Section 332, for a single point of contact, and when can I expect to be able to announce this POC and the process to my constituents?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the delegation's continued support throughout all the work that has occurred on this very important issue. What I've asked, and I asked them this months ago, the JTF to do, is to be able to field the calls, the inquiries that are coming in from various sectors, and to be able to make sure that we are directing those calls or facilitating those the people who have questions, facilitating them getting answers to their questions by making sure they get linked up to the right agency. And so that work continues. I think that's the best approach, because if we don't do it that way, then I agree with you, it will continue to be confusing.
Thank you. One humble suggestion, considering further empowering the Joint Task Force Red Hill with the responsibility of coordinating overall efforts in regards to Red Hill, especially as you mentioned communications, but also being able to make sure that when citizens and quite frankly community leaders and people in the public have questions, that they can get answers straight from the JTF, because it is very difficult to even follow the chain once you are then handed off to the next entity for assistance. I would also add that one of the big things that has been brought up is the constant rotation of commands. We know that is part of the military structure. However, we are looking for institutional commitment and leadership, and that is something critical that needs to be part of the JTF as well. Want to segue into another topic over our infrastructure. By the end of the decade, we all know here very well that we'll need to renew all of the land leases in Hawaii. We've heard throughout this hearing and out in other hearings how critical these are to our readiness posture in the Indo-Pacific. Yet, we also know that these facilities and infrastructures on these lands are falling apart. In some cases, they are literally putting military and civilian lives at risk and negatively impacting our environment. And I'm not just talking about Red Hill. These are military-wide issues across all of our islands across my district. This is as much a statement as a question, Mr. Secretary and General Milley. Do you see our old and deteriorating military infrastructure as a liability to our readiness and our posture in the Pacific?
It's absolutely important that we do everything that we can, not only here, but in all corners of our organization, to ensure that we continue to update our infrastructure. You see us dedicating $5.1 billion towards that endeavor in this budget for operational effectiveness, and so we will continue to invest in this going forward. It includes a number of things, housing and so many other things. And to your point, this is critical. So.
And I would just reinforce with the remaining time that I have that if you're serious about these land leases and maintaining presence in Hawaii, then maintaining this infrastructure, investing in it, and actually showing action to our people is absolutely necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. General Milley, are you familiar with a program that's extremely important to me? It's the Army's Humvee anti-lock brake system and electric stability control. So we're having a problem with the Humvees rolling over, and they're killing our military. I think over 100 deaths and hundreds of casualties. And tragically, every year, we continue to lose troops. We're giving you the funding. And I think there's 47,000 vehicles. They're going to eventually, be replaced with the JLTV. So we have 3 options. We can retrofit them, we can buy new ones, or we can just let a dangerous situation continue. And I'm advocating for saving $8 billion in retrofitting these. So I just wanted to ask you, generally, what could you do if we saved $8 billion? There's a lot of, billion here, as they say, then you're talking about some money.
No, you can, $8 billion would be tremendously important for a lot of things, modernization programs, training, readiness, et cetera. Let me get back with General McConville, Chief of Staff of the Army. I think the retrofit thing obviously makes sense, but let me circle back and find out what the status of that is.
And I'll be very frank. Yeah, it's good politics because this is in my district, but I don't care about that. I care about
I got it. It's
the readiness.
safety of troops.
It's good policy. It really, truly is.
I got it.
And it's about safety. And we're asking, and it just seems like there's a dragging of the feet. And I don't want any more soldiers. I know you don't want any more soldiers to die or get hurt. And we have a solution, and I don't think the solution is buying new ones. And I know there's a political element to that. But
So if I could just add a little
please,
bit to that. The Army's taken a holistic approach to this, and this is truly important. And I think that there are 10 sites total that are focused on this work. They're retrofitting about 655 vehicles per month. Hopefully, they'll be able to speed that up at some point in time. But that's kind of where we are, and really appreciate you continuing to shine a light on this for us.
And Secretary Austin, this is something that I wanted to ask you about because it's near and dear to my heart because my father served in the military. I served in the military. And my father, when he was in a training exercise, his life was saved in the late 50s by an African-American soldier. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for African-American soldiers, literally. And do you believe that there's any room in the DOD for racism or bigotry?
DOD does not support, Secretary Austin does not support any form of racism or bigotry.
When I was in the military 30 years ago, I remember going on active duty and they gave us a briefing when you PCS'd. And they said to us, there will be no isms, there will be no racism, no sexism, no nepotism, and there's zero tolerance for it. And there was, and I believe there still is. And the way you affect a culture, as you know, is you can't instill a culture in months or years. You instill it over decades. And I believe the U.S. military has done that successfully. And that's why, I was very distressed to see this post from a DOD employee. And I quote, she says, "I'm so exhausted at these white folks in these PD sessions. This lady actually had the audacity to say that black people can be racist too. I had to stop the session and give the Karen the business." I would imagine you don't agree with that statement.
Again, I don't support any form of racist commentary or any form of discrimination. You may have heard me say earlier that it's important for our country to know and our dependents to know that DOD schools are producing good products. Our 4th and 8th graders score the highest scores in math and reading in the country.
And Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, it begs the question, and I agree with you, there is no room for it. We have a special force, we have a diverse nation, we have a diverse military, and we have the best military that history's ever known. So my question is, why is this woman still working for you?
Well, you certainly, I think DODIA investigated this issue. This is a personnel issue, the specifics of which I will not discuss in an open hearing.
But if it was a general officer, would they still be working for you if they said something like this? And you could twist it. It could be something about white folks, black folks, Asian folks. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, does it? Who's the target?
It doesn't. I mean, any kind of racist or language or discriminatory behavior, that's not who we are. Again,
but she still works for the Department of Defense.
Again,
I don't think there's
won't
any room for a
discuss-
person like that says those kinds of things. I think she should be fired forthwith.
Yeah, I won't discuss personnel issues in this hearing. So.
Well, that's unfortunate because I think we should discuss them, and I think that she should no longer be a part of our Department of Defense. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Mr. Davis of North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I want to first start today by thanking all of the men and women who are serving our country, both home and abroad, and even those who are here in support roles. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And General Milley, thank you. God bless you for your service. And Secretary, thanks for your continued service, and definitely it's good to see you again. My question, General Milley, I agree with you that our adversaries view space as a war-fighting domain and believe that achieving supremacy in this area will be a decisive factor in winning future conflicts. Do you believe the budget goes far enough to support U.S. space capabilities to ensure that we maintain a competitive edge?
As with any budget, it's all about balance. You're really balancing resources to make sure that you're advancing along a wide variety of programs. This budget puts about $33 billion, I think it is, into space. I think that's an adequate amount of money given the totality of the budget. What is key here is how do you apply that $33 billion? And we're applying that in our space programs for defense and offense. What we have to be careful, though, as a nation also is the weaponization of space, this domain of space. Space is critical to our country. It's critical to our commerce. It's critical to our day-to-day life. And we, the military, have for certain critical capabilities that rely in space. So, as I said before, resilient, redundant capabilities in space, a lot of small things running around that gives us those capabilities. That's what I would advocate for as we go forward in the programs. But $33 billion is a lot of money. It depends on where we put it.
Thank you.